is going.
Okay.
Well, then we will call the May 19th Advisory Committee meeting to order. And the first order of business is the approval of the March 17th, 2021 minutes. Has everyone had the opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
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 Any questions, any revisions necessary?
Was it last meeting that I asked about the disposal of the recycling bins?
I believe it was Carolyn.
Because I don't see anything in there. And
That was the meeting before, I believe, Sarah Lynn.
I
okay.
believe so. Sorry, I need to switch something here.
Yeah,
Bear in mind, we did not have a meeting last month. It would have been March.
Correct.
March.
Okay.
So are the meeting minutes approved?
If I have a motion to approve,
Motion.
Who
Second.
motion?
I'm sorry, but who made the motion, please?
It was Adam.
Okay.
Yeah, motion by Mr. Story. Do I have a second?
Second, Sandra Leonard.
Thank you, Sandra.
We have a second. Any additional discussion? All in favor? Vote by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the 109 board report. And I would imagine, Pete, you're going to be handling this.
Yes, sir. So the 109 board met last month, and really there was a couple things that they wanted us to discuss. One is the annual report. When we were giving a report on there were some questions and concerns about how we were recording the curbside services variable rates. So what that is, and let me kind of go to the definition in the ordinance. Variable rate service rate is a collection service pricing structure that allows customers to choose the frequency of collection and or the number of containers that may be placed out for service or collection. As part of the annual report, and now let me go to one more screen real quick. As part of the annual report in ordinance, there's two things that drive the reporting. One is the state annual report. The other one is local ordinance. What I'm quoting here is local ordinance because it was designed to meet the state requirements and more from the waste district when it was created. So as a condition of a license to operate a solid waste system of business here, all private waste haulers operating within the county must, as a condition of the license, have a variable service rate pricing structure for their representative residential customers. The second part of this is required reporting, and it's February 15th for the annual report. They have to report, and it says such reports shall be in conformance with the format and requirements set forth by the department. The report will provide data to the district on at least the following items, and it gives these things. We use a program called Retrack Connect. It's a national program that was kind of developed through the EPA to track stuff. Many states use it, many municipalities use it, and annually a licensee such as a recycler, a waste hauler, a disposal facility goes on here. They report all of their material. They certify that it's accurate and true to the best of their knowledge, and then they send it in. And we get that. We're the custodians of the program. We pay a subscription fee to Retract Connect each year to do this. They report it. We take that material, we put it into the annual report. We create this bit of information. So on solid waste issues in Jefferson County, this in particular screen right here is the variable rate pricing reporting for the individual haulers. So, and these are our monthly costs. And we've been tracking these for a long time. And we bring these every year to the committee. So what you see is basically for garbage, recycling, yard waste, and then in all sectors, like an all-inclusive contract. And that kind of keeps track of where we're at for people to see, to know, to make decisions on, and to meet the requirements of the ordinance. So what you see here is the actual numbers as reported by the waste haulers each year. Now, one of the questions and concerns that was brought up by a member of the board, Robert Lee, was that it doesn't take into account the different types of services that are out there. And like garbage, you have a few places in the county that do twice a week garbage, which increases their cost. You have certain households or home rule cities, I think, that do backdoor service, which is an additional cost. All of those things are factored into these rates. And I think the point was that it drives the concern that it drives the cost up, and it's an unrealistic cost. You know, I'm not sure how much that we have those services happening, and if it's enough to really make a difference on these prices. But what I will say is that in the things that the haulers in this case report, are we asking all the right questions?
Well, first of all, I didn't follow. It sounded like a quantum leap in the description of the problem. Can you go back to that part, please?
The concern is that we're not getting a true cost per customer to the annual report or to the 109 board as to the actual cost. I think Bob's concern, the way I understood it, was because there are additional services being rendered above and beyond a monthly charge, that it drives the cost up. Now,
Can we have a
Bob is
tangible
here.
example?
I don't think that there was an example given.
Is he
But I
here?
do know that there is a home rule city, I believe, that has twice a week garbage service.
Oh, there
Right.
is. Prospect does that.
Windy
We
Hills
have
does
twice a
twice
week
garbage.
service. We have recycle and yard waste once a week. And we do have backdoor pickup.
We have the same thing in Windy Hills.
Uh-huh.
So is it twice a week garbage?
Twice a
Yes.
week garbage, once a week yard waste, and once a week recycle and backdoor.
Okay.
Same in Windy Hills.
So how many, I mean, with your knowledge of what's going on, how many home rule cities do that? And what are the number of households that we're talking about to compare it to the 160,000 households? What percentage of them are like that? I don't think we know. I don't think anybody knows.
I agree. I don't think we have a clue.
Pete, this
I
is
think
Bob.
it would be easy to figure it out, but it seems to me that we should start with what is it we're trying to do? And wait, go back to that chart, please. I mean, it seems to me that we ought to do one of two things. Define what's garbage collection, and it ought to be something that's a common denominator, like once a week at the curb. And if other people want to have it twice a week or backdoor service, that's fine. But if we're just trying to figure out what's the basics in Jefferson County, we don't need to get into that. If some people are worried that their services look expensive because they're providing extra services, that may be a marketing problem, but we ought to be able to work around it. But Bob, now that you've surfaced, why don't you explain what the problem is, please?
Well, I will, and I disagree with you, quite frankly, Sarah.
I'm sure you do.
The issue is if you take the chart at face value, it is in error in regards to just what is the average price per month for individual circumstances. There are plenty of people that have twice a week service. There's plenty of people that have rear door service. The difference in those two could be based from your basic curbside service to simply recycling, yard waste, and once a week unlimited service. It's substantial. It could be as much as $10, $15. And it would definitely affect the average overall price for a specific hauler if they have quite a few of those. So, you're talking about not an unusual situation, but one that there are a lot of our customers that prefer to have a decision as to what they really want as opposed to strictly one type of service. And
Where's the public interest concern here? I'm not seeing that yet.
Well,
The public-
actually, one thing that's clear is that if we listen to Bob, this report is not telling us as much as we could afford to know. And I guess it depends on why we're generating the report
Precisely.
as to whether or not we need to put some of these other things in here.
Thank you.
From the legal perspective, we're required to statutorily.
Well, that's understood, Pete, but if the information isn't factual and shows a different type of service or a different number that is actually factual, it's irrelevant. So
I don't think this is not factual. It just may not be as representative as you would like, correct?
no, not correct at all. It is unfactual simply because there are other types of services available to clientele that this doesn't reflect the real number.
So the way that it's supposed to be reported is the average cost per household. And in that cost per household, it's supposed to be reported with everything. So it does have every cost in it. Okay, so the question becomes, okay, and I think Sarah Lynn was right in this regard, that there needs to be a standardized service once a month for this type of service. But I think that it should actually be, are we asking the right questions? And should we be asking more questions about how many customers have backdoor service? What does that cost? How many people have twice a week garbage? What does that cost?
Or what
How many
is the
people-
additional cost if we're talking about some of those things? I'm not sure we're always going to find out that a particular hauler who has all of those services is, in terms of this particular chart, always going to end up with a higher dollar value for their services. We may find that sometimes some of the haulers who provide fewer services are much more expensive. But right now, you almost, I don't know, I'm not sure. We might find out also that a particular hauler has all of those extra services. And as a result, they're showing a very high dollar value, which is not appropriate. And I think that's what Bob might be looking at.
And I think that's a really good point. I think another point here is trying to make sure that we're making a comparison or to differentiate the different types of services. One is a individual subscription service versus a contracted service. I think that would probably be one of the more important questions for us to ask. So my thoughts here is, are we asking the right questions? Should we look further? I don't think anybody's looking for an answer here tonight. We have one more year to go. Well, time's flying. It's February 15th. We have plenty of time to take a look at this a little bit more in depth. Are we asking the right questions? I don't think we're going to solve it tonight, but I think what we need to do is just say that we're going to take a look at it a little bit more in depth, so that we're making sure that we're getting the right information, and that we're fairly representing what is being done in the community.
Pete, can I, please? On your variable rate pricing, I think the one thing that we can all agree on, as a waste hauler, we have to provide the three services: garbage, recycling, and yard waste. And the one thing that does stick out, that there are certain companies that really don't want to be in the yard waste collection side of things, represented by their price on a monthly basis. So, and if you look at that yard waste, do they bill year round for it, or is it a seasonally billed service? So, I'm looking at fiscal year 2020. You've got someone who's offering yard waste at $24.40 a month. They really don't want to be in the yard waste business.
Exactly.
Yep.
And what I will say, Bruce, and I think you really bring up a good point. If I was to show the other chart that goes with this, thinking of hauler number 2, that is a hauler that is almost exclusively subscription based. That's in the unorganized collection part of the county, where you may have 2 to 3 haulers, 4 to 5 haulers on the same street. And when you look at their diversion numbers, it's at like 0.3%, whereas everybody else is above 10%.
Except hauler 6 appears not to be offering recycling or yard waste.
Hauler number 6 is a brand new hauler this year, and we haven't gotten everything in line for that. It is something that we need to work with that particular hauler with.
You might want to just put something in that field like data currently being tabulated or something, so that people don't think that only that one company is ignoring the rules.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I still go back to, first of all, these haulers are not identified, so I don't think we're hurting anybody by publishing it. But I think that this committee spends too much time trying to take care of private business interest, and that we need to have a compelling public interest before we spend much more time protecting somebody's marketing.
I'm not sure that's really what we're doing.
I'm not either. I think that this just seems a little weird to me. And again, it should be driven by what's in the public interest. That's why this organization exists.
But if
So
this
if we-
report is going forward,
Pardon?
and if this report is going forward and it isn't accurate, I'm not sure that we've helped anything. I think, for example, Pete's last comment about the different types of haulers, I think that is a very relevant point. And I think that, I don't think having more information impedes anybody.
Well, what I'm trying to say is I think there's a big distinction between accuracy and representation. And I don't think anybody has put down incorrect information. It may be formatted in a way that could be misinterpreted. I'm okay with fixing that. But I don't think we have to spend a lot of time protecting a company that charges more than everybody else, if that's really the agenda here.
I'm not sure that you'll find that when we get the information that that's what will come out.
Nor am I.
For example, the haulers that are doing trash twice a week opposed to once a week, I think we may find that in the long run, when we reduce it to the smallest element, they're not charging a lot. And that would be interesting to know by itself.
Right. And the thing of it is, all of the entities that are getting twice a week and backdoor have private haulers. they can provide those household numbers to us so we can determine how representative are these special services, and we can compute if we wanted to do a weighted average very easily. I hope they're willing to cough up that information if they're going to be pissing and moaning about this.
Well, going to what is actually in the ordinance right now, it talks about the number of households and businesses served, the geographical area served, the frequency of service, amount, it talks about those things, but I think this ordinance is probably 25 years old. Services have changed, certainly in those years. I'm not so sure that we don't need to look at the issue a little bit deeper and make sure that ordinance reflects what we're trying to do here. And get the right information. The district is the agency that makes a lot of decisions, or supposed to make a lot of decisions based on solid waste management for Jefferson County. So the more information that it has, the better, in my estimation.
So if we're going to open up this can of worms, I request that we change it from variable, because historically variable means a inclining block rate, where the more trash you collect, the more you pay per volume, and that we call it something like a menu pricing schedule or something like that to reflect what we're really doing. This is not really variable. It's per service instead.
Well, obviously you would look at the definition in the ordinance. If that's something that we need to change, then that's something that we need to change. But I think that it is true that we want to make sure that we're representing what the cost of services are in Jefferson County. I'm not sure that we're asking all the right questions to be able to do so.
And Pete, what would you anticipate using this rate and this chart for? What is the reason that you need to know that information?
Number one, it's data that we're required to collect. The other part is it's supposed to go to the state. The state does what they do with it. I mean, it's information that I think that the board would want to know. It might not come into play for years, but if there's a decision that needs to be made about services, these are definitely questions and answers that should be there.
And they should be correct and factual. That's my
Absolutely.
concern. That is truly my concern.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%, Bob. And I think that's why I say that I'm not sure that the way that we're doing it right now gives us it is accurate. It is accurate because it is the average cost of all of those services unbroken out.
Right.
So whether that's higher or lower, depending upon what customer you are, is the information that we don't know. The type of customer that you are is what we really have no idea here. That is the absolute average of all of those services.
And I would anticipate, Pete, that the type of customer that you are will be just as important to the board member as the price that an individual is paying.
I think that's the same number.
No, it's not. The fact that they want special services is important, and it should be considered in regards to the board members and how we go forward.
Oh, yeah. No. I agree with that. I think that people should have the ability to upsize their services if they so choose. I mean, that's their prerogative.
Can you do it in a two-part way? One that just has once a day and one that has twice a day or twice a week?
Well, I think that we could put together a set of questions looking at all the different variables to include twice a week garbage service. It's going to make the form longer, but you know, that's all it'll do. And once you've
And there's,
completed it for the first year, on the form, it's not all that difficult to complete this form.
yeah, because some people want different type containers, better containers, not as good containers.
I don't know that. I mean, you can get a little bit of a variable in a container. I don't know. I don't know if we would want to go to the point of what style of container that you're using.
I'm not sure that the style of container is going to relate to the price.
The variable there is limited or unlimited service. How
Okay.
much you actually pick up. That's the factor in regards to additional cost.
So
And
I
number
think
of
that
times
that's
a week.
something that could be like twice a week service, garbage service, not backdoor. A comment, other variables, backdoor service once a week. What are the variables? And allow for a little bit of comment and context from the hauler when they report. And as we go through this first cycle, we see what all these comments are. Then we can better build our report the following year to make sure that we're getting a fair representation of services. And, you know, we're going back to the whole point here, to Sandra's point. We may go through this exercise and find out a particular service is a much more cost-effective service, and other people, other home rule cities may say, I want to do that.
Well, especially if it increases recycling and saves the.
Yeah,
Sandra, you disappeared,
she's still there.
but I mean, her audio stopped.
I'd stop talking.
Okay, didn't sound like it would right. So anyway, again, my point is if we're going to bifurcate or even worse, we got to have the numbers of households that are getting these services or it's GEICO.
Yeah, and you know, a couple of the other things that we do is look at the diversion rate for each hauler. Another thing that we do is we look at the participation rate based upon these questions of people that have service or don't have service. How many people have recycling service? How many people have yard waste service? How many people have garbage service? Garbage service is probably one of the most important ones in certain parts of the county. Because when we get when everybody adds up all their numbers and we have all the total households in the county, and 5% of the people in Jefferson County does not have a waste hauler, what do you think happens with that 5%? And where is that waste going? I can tell you that the collateral to that is the fact that my enforcement group is out there enforcing things based upon complaints about somebody filling up their garage with garbage and there's rats everywhere. How
That's
much?
why your comment on
That's there.
putting subscription service rather than large contracts, breaking that out would be a good thing too.
Yeah, the subscription service is prone to people not paying their bills. I think any of the waste haulers here could attest to the number of people that do that.
I don't know if this is important or not, but with the price of the non-ferrous metals, I'd like to know whether it's affecting the recycling. You know, cans, we're probably paying 65 cents a pound. So copper's over $5 a pound. So I don't know if that affects anything or doesn't affect anything.
Well, I think that would be reflected in the tipping cost at a recycling facility. And it'll adjust itself over time. If the waste haulers are having to pay a lot more for tipping, then that'll be reflected in their price. It might be a little bit slow and it might be up and down. It's hard to reflect that because you have contracts and things like that. And nobody can really predict where commodity prices are going to go. The value of a ton of single stream is up and down. Right now, it's down, at least for us, it's down significantly.
in all honesty, I think there are many more um, variables, if you will, in the services provided, and it does not adjust on a monthly basis like the metal market adjusts. That's normally budgeted year over year and by agreement. And there's so many separate contracts out there. Bob's point of volume-based service is true because there are contracts that require 2 containers per household with a recycling container and a yard waste container. Some may only have 1 container per serviced once a week, and the others may have 2 containers serviced once a week or 2 containers serviced twice a week. So, I mean, I can probably tell you that there's very few people that change their subscription residential price on a quarterly basis.
Can I ask a question of the haulers? Has services being offered changed much in the past 5 to 6 years? Meaning, are we doing things differently over the past 5 or 6 years than we used to?
A major change has been the collection of recycling from, the small bins to the 65 or 95 gallon carts, and whether automated or manual rear load.
So the collection scenarios really haven't changed a whole lot. And when I'm saying collection scenarios, meaning backdoor versus twice a week for garbage, every other week recycling versus weekly recycling. The scenarios really haven't changed all that much. And if that's the case, I would think that we have something to go back and look at to see all the different services, because they were listed out in the study, I believe. So we could start there and then see what's changed, and use those scenarios as a way to go forward in these pricings. And if we can be more accurate at that point.
Yeah, Pete, this is Brian. There would be an escalation in yard waste and of course leaf collection, those kinds of things, because those are all kept separately now. But to try to maybe make one comment about Sarah Lynn's thought and your discussion back and forth, one of the considerations that you have to give to this chart is that we've had such substantial choices in Jefferson County, and people take advantage of choice. So if you look at like these, we just had a subcommittee meeting. Those reports we're going to read, because we looked at them, Pete, as you'll recall, in 2019. Those cities have limited collection. If you can't get it in the bin or the toter, it's not collected. Louisville substantially is what's known as a take-all market. And we don't only collect 1 or 2 cans at the curb or at the back door, but we collect generally almost everything that's put out with the trash. So that would include mattresses and box springs and chairs and tables and things like that, appliances. Now, that having been said, let's get back to Jerry McGraw's comment during the subcommittee meeting about what people do with things. If that choice service goes away from people, where do we think those materials are going to end up? I'm just raising that as a hypothetical question, because I think, it's rhetorical, but we need to consider that, because I'm connecting that to the 2018 study, to be frank, and what kind of considerations we have going forward. And those considerations are significant if certain standardized services are put in place that disappoint people.
See, this is a completely different agenda here. We're talking about this chart and whether it represents things, not anything along the lines of what services are going to be allowed or anything else.
I understand, Sarah Lynn, but those things are connected to this chart. They were during the discussions and each of the meetings that we held. So
Well, if I could
I just think
suggest,
we need to be aware of that. You know, as we look at the costs in these charts, it's not just, you know, once a week curb collection for some companies that have reported. That's all. Just trying to clarify that.
I think the whole goal, and I think what we need to look at here, we need to look at it a little bit more in depth. I think we need or we've agreed that we want to try to make something that's very reflective of the services and those services costs across the county, whatever those services are currently at the time that the report is done. And we don't have to get it done today. We can look at this over the next several months. And if we so choose to change or enhance our collection of data from the annual report, that's what we do. But I would think that we've talked pretty good tonight. I think everybody has a little bit better understanding of the issue. And, you know, I would think that we should move on to our next item, if that's okay. We've got a lot to do.
I believe we're confused enough that it's time to move on.
Thank you, sir.
What's your next item?
Letter about stakeholder involvement, 109 board. One of the things that was brought up at the last board meeting, and honestly, Bob is here, and he could probably speak to it a little bit better. And if I sent out a letter from Bob to all of the 109 board about a concern about stakeholders. So, I mean, we can't read the letter here, but if you jump into your emails, you can see the letter. But I think it'd be fair. I mean, with Bob here, I think if Bob would expand upon his letter, I think that, you know, we're hearing it directly from him.
Well, I appreciate it. And I think it is going to be on the next 109 board action items, correct?
Yes, my understanding, yes.
Just quickly, it simply states that, you know, last year, it's probably been a good 13, 14 months ago now, I'm not for sure. But there was a general conversation in regards to, at the 109 board, in regards to stakeholders and that how important it was in order to get their input. The chairman, the 109 board agreed with that. And I just wanted to make sure that we pursue his wishes as well as I would hope most of the 109 board member wishes. And not only in regards to at the 109 board, but in regards to at the advisory committee and possibly the subcommittees. And quite frankly, in being part and listening to some of the subcommittees, I do appreciate and have heard that they are receptive to the comments and to making sure that they hear from the stakeholders also, and I appreciate that. So it's just simply going forward, making sure that everybody has the opportunity to hear what the Solid Waste Management Board is talking about and has the opportunity in order to present their thoughts and their views and how issues might affect their particular constituents. And that's pretty much it, Pete.
Thank you.
Getting ready or trying to rejoin
Is that a person or a
this White House.
device?
And with that, I believe we have some stakeholders involved with our meeting this evening. And without calling you out, if you would like to be recognized, please advise us who's on the call. But the stakeholder involvement, we were instructed to bring fully vetted recommendations to the 109 board, and we will need the involvement of stakeholders with regard to certain initiatives, because we want to try to bring collaborative solutions to the 109 board for consideration. I know our time's valuable. I appreciate any and all stakeholder involvement. And we will try to be respectful of your time. But any input that you would offer would be greatly appreciated. And all of you are always welcome at any of these subcommittee meetings or committee meetings. And as we consider some of these initiatives that we're undertaking. So with that said, are there any stakeholders out on this call that have any questions at this time prior to the subcommittee reports?
Mr. Chairman, this is Juva Barber with the Building Industry Association. I just want to say thank you for allowing me and I think some other stakeholders to speak and be with you all tonight. We started reviewing some of this report pre-COVID, and I know a lot has happened in this past year, so I appreciate the chance to touch base with you all because I think you have some short-term recommendations that will obviously impact the construction industry. So if you all don't mind, I would like to stay on the call and hear what your C&D material subcommittee said and potentially be notified when anything that you all propose or discuss impacts construction and demolition, because again, I know that's going to have an impact on our members. Additionally, and I'm not sure if it's you, Mr. Chairman, or if it's Mr. Flood, I really appreciate if someone could come to our Lane Development Committee and talk to our members about what changes are being proposed, what are the short-term changes, just to make the entire industry aware of what's going on. And again, I thank you all for being here, allowing us to be here tonight.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm sure with you contributing your time to our effort, I'm sure that we can reciprocate and be a part of your meeting so that we can keep you informed of what's under consideration.
Juva, this is Pete. I did receive your request, and yes, you will be added to all of the meeting requests. We welcome you, and of course, we welcome all stakeholders into the process. So if there is, if you want us to have somebody come out to meet with your committee, absolutely. I don't think that would be a problem at all.
Thank you so much, Pete. And like all issues that we all take up, this is much more complicated than anybody on the outside would ever imagine. So I appreciate you inviting me in, and I appreciate somebody coming to see us. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. I think JD is also here on the call. JD Carey.
Yes, it's JD Carey, the director of the Louisville Apartment Association. And I kind of go along with Juva. I appreciate all your efforts, and I would also appreciate being contacted and let me put my input in for anything that would involve multifamily here in Louisville. Our association just passed the 65,000 unit mark, so we now represent over 65,000 units here in the Louisville metro area. And I appreciate you letting me speak tonight and be part of the meeting tonight.
If I could, from the staff's point of view, I believe that any process that we undertake as a staff in whatever groups that we do, that stakeholder involvement is key to anything that we do. Even if we was to create a regulation that was perfect in every way, unless we had stakeholder involvement, it will not work. And I think that is something that I've learned, and I think that is common to any process and thing that you do. And we have to hear from the people that it impacts. And I would say that we always want to make sure that we have a very good representation of stakeholders for whatever we do, from pro, against. We need to hear all sides.
Hello, everyone. This is Stacy Roof with the Kentucky Restaurant Association. Again, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be part of this meeting and this group. and appreciate all the work that goes into trying to craft the approaches to deal with all these complicated issues. And I'll echo what JD and what Juva said as well. If there are any items that you all discussed that would impact our restaurant membership, I would love to be included in that conversation or alerted, and any input that we can submit or help weigh in on would be terrific. And we have, gosh, close to a couple thousand locations in Louisville and Jefferson County. So that's a lot of waste and a lot of items that you all are talking about pertain to them. So again, thank you so much for including us, and appreciate the opportunity to learn more.
We thank you for your involvement, and we appreciate all the input, and for all of you, we will do our best to keep you informed, again, to come up with solutions that are embraced by the entire community. Anyone else out there?
I think Sarah Lynn has a finger up.
I wanted to add that it feels to me like, as hard as we have worked to include the regulated body, nobody seems to know that we did it. But regardless, I feel like I'm going to sound like a cranky middle-aged person. And Stacy, this isn't about you who just spoke, but I feel like I've spent my whole career working on committees to develop rules. And then at the very last minute, the regulated body shows up and gets it squashed. And so I just want to beg the regulated body to please participate throughout the process, because it's a whole lot more efficient and it has a whole lot few harder feelings. And it doesn't send the message to citizens who volunteer their time that it really doesn't matter because business people always trump them. So in the interest of tamping down cynicism in Louisville, I encourage you folks to show up, not just when you're told you have to come and rag on us, but when you actually could do some good.
All right, thank you. I don't believe anyone here is taking shots at any other group. Again, our goal is to come up with a solution that is embraced by a significant majority of the businesses, the residents of the county. And obviously the goal is to increase the recycling rate within Jefferson County. So any and all comments, concerns, ideas will always be appreciated. Is there anyone else that wants to make a comment? Hearing none, again, my most sincere thank you to the three of you that did speak, and I look forward to working with you more closely in the subcommittees. All right. For your listening pleasure, now we have the subcommittee reports, and the first report will be by Ms. Leonard on Residential and C&D Subcommittee. Sandra, are you prepared for this?
You're muted, Sandra. Sandra, you're muted. Trying to get Sandra's attention.
Can you just unmute her?
I'm trying to. I don't have controls. I can't do it. Do you have that, Karen?
She is.
Oh, Sandra, are you unmuted now?
I was.
There you go. Okay. I don't think we heard really much of any of your statement.
No. Are you hearing it now?
Hearing it now, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. basically, we've got a two-pronged approach going. One prong is dealing with the costs of sorting versus the value of the commodities that come out of it. And the other one is the one that's in front of you, and that deals with getting stakeholders involved in the process. The issue is, who are the stakeholders and what questions will we ask them? And you can see Pete's done a lot of work because the questions are already up here. Pete, do you want to talk about the questions?
Well, I think at the last meeting, we was trying to take a look and bring in just a very small little segment here. And the only person that has really done C&D recycling in Louisville, and really kind of look at the C&D processing facility and the questions that we have around that. And I think commodity pricing is definitely part of it. But what I've tried to do was to build a set of questions that would tell us about a C&D processing facility, not necessarily that everything about C&D, it's whether or not a C&D processing facility is even feasible. And so I hope that I've done okay on phrasing these questions. I think it'll give us a broad sense, but the committee always has the option of asking additional questions. So right now, I would like to introduce David Wicking. David, can you hear me?
What's going on?
Actually, I wanted to interrupt and say that if we've got lay people on this call, you probably ought to tell them what C&D is.
That's a really good point. I'm used to being on the committee, which I think has become very familiar with C&D material by now. C&D material is construction and demolition waste. And it comes from, obviously, many different things, from the demolition of a single family wooden household structure to a multi-story residential structure, to a manufacturing facility, to roadways, and the like. So it's a very broad category, even though it's just C&D, it's almost its own entity as we talk about things. So I think what the recommendation was that we're kind of looking at is for simply a processing facility for mixed loads of demolition and construction material from sites. And it is specifically mixed loads, we're not talking about things that are already source separated, such as if a business is already sorting out their brick, we're not talking about that. If they're sorting out their lumber, we're not talking about that. We're talking about mixed loads. So it's really kind of looking at material that's already being generated, does not really require a demolition person or a construction person to do anything different other than take processed or mixed loads of C&D for processing. So our question from the committee point of view was, is it economically feasible? Is it physically feasible in Louisville Metro? And the only person that we know that has done this is Dave Wicking, and I think the company's name was Metro Recycling. So did that do an adequate job of explaining?
Attaboy.
Okay, awesome. Dave.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes. Do you kind of see the questions that we've got up there on the screen?
I do.
And is it something that you can just kind of free talk and work down there? I think Matt Smith has also been involved in this a little bit more than just dabbling in it. So I would ask him to jump in and talk wherever.
So, Chairman, Pete, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to take a few minutes to answer some questions and put some possible points forward for your consideration. I'd like to get to the questions, but I'd like to take a couple of minutes to reassert some facts that I believe have been since the start of this discussion with Pete and myself, 15 years ago. I believe that ICA and Adam Story's business has been going now 25 years in the C&D business. Some of the items that I think that are important to agree before going into questions and trying to come up with specific solutions are that I feel one assertion that we can make guaranteed is that recycling is a cyclical business. I believe Bruce Blue was on the conversation before. I'm sure he's seen prices of $50 a ton for metal all the way up to $1,000 a ton metals. These commodities fluctuate. Concrete prices or recycled concrete, the price fluctuates based upon normally with the quarrying and the mining industries. The wood industry has got challenges versus coal and heating and other industries. So not only do you have the virgin supplier industry, but you also have then a cyclical commodity price, which is ultimately comes to Pete's first question is, what is the cost of processing construction and demolition waste? Now, the tree hugger in me goes the other way and say, what's the price of not recycling and not doing construction and demolition waste for future generations? Unfortunately, only very few people truly grasp what we are doing by just using virgin commodities and throwing themselves away. I can talk to the fact that being English, that we have already now had to go back into our previously made landfills to dig the commodities out of them and recycle our landfills because we've run out of space, something that you are now in the United States seeing happening on a large scale in New York, New Jersey, and up in the northeastern states where land is of a premium cost. So that's one assertion that I'd like to make. The second one is that of all of the costs, and I think that Matt sees this on a daily basis, I think Adam sees this on a daily basis, that manpower, personnel, and people are really the most expensive portion of the recycling game. So having the ability to have technology made available for equipment purchasing to reduce those labor costs can be beneficial. But again, I think that we can turn labor costs around because a lot of innovative counties now are forming 501c3 charities and having materials sorted where those materials can then subsidize that charity to make money. And a good example of that is people returning from prison, maybe people looking to re-enter the workforce after serious illness, drug abuse. There are certain places and jobs where there can be projects and grant monies made available for bringing these people back into an industry in sorting. And when we talk about sorting, I mean, we can talk about televisions, electronics recycling, we can talk about glass recycling, we can talk about many different types of product recycling where these people could truly find a pathway back into, a good, steady job. So I think that there are many solutions out there that can be looked at on the personnel side of it. If I take everything that I've learned in being in recycling now for nearly 40 years, I would say that the biggest impact that I have seen has always been in Germany. And I always wondered why the Germans and what the Germans have done so well with their recycling. And it came ultimately down to two things. Number one, education. I feel that Jefferson County, before it starts looking at all of the different projects and materials and regulations and everything else, I think there needs to be a phase now where stakeholders are educated. I think that people are educated and understand what is and is not possible. I think Adam would probably say this, and I know Matt certainly says this, that it's really easy to collect recyclables. The difficult portion is getting rid of them at the day. So, you know, nobody likes talking about the difficult portions of these things at times, but I think having a solid plan in place for the eventual collection of materials that can't be commoditized and sold, where do those materials then go if it becomes a problem? A solution that I saw in Germany for this was and I believe that the construction demolition or the construction industries represented here, was to levy a charge on the construction companies that were using disposal at point, and to put that into a grant/trust fund that was then used at times of need by the industry to ensure that the materials were disposed of in a proper manner. That obviously brings up a lot of red flags and is a discussion, because obviously those costs are going to reflect back onto the public who are trying to get construction done at a time when they're normally investing huge amounts of money. So I realize that that is a conversation, but again, the education of how that can happen is obviously important, because I think if we take shingles 10 years ago, Adam, I don't know if you want to claim before 10 years, but we'll just throw 10 years. Around 10 years ago, there were 3 shingle recycling businesses here in town that were super successful in diverting all of the shingles to different projects. Unfortunately, with the price of oil declining through the years, it's made shingle recycling now almost non-attractive. However, number one, I am proud of the work we did in getting rid of shingles, because we did divert several 100,000 tons in Indiana and Kentucky to roadway building. But on the other side of it, now that cyclical market has stopped being as attractive as it was. Matt Smith's business, if Matt doesn't mind me talking to it, Matt's business is very cyclical as well. His is more weather related. The trees get knocked over in hurricanes. You know, how does he deal with, you know, trees being knocked down left, right, and center? Against some years, there's just not as much landscaping or as much construction that does ground clearance, resulting in less wood. So even Matt, I think, would be honest at the point of that his business is cyclical. So when we look at the cost of processing construction and demolition waste, that's probably the most loaded question, because from a county and a state standpoint, I believe that there are materials that can be reclaimed profitably currently that we are not collecting. The problem is that there is no regulatory nor educational backbone behind making that happen. So that would be the answer to the first question, Pete.
Okay. What type of loads? I guess when I phrase this question, I'm looking at what's the most valuable. What's the one that if I was running a construction demolition processing facility, would I want, and which one would I not want?
I think that you go into the materials. So I did do some prep for today because I know that there would be a lot of people that are obviously in the industry. You know, we can spout a lot of numbers out about what, who, and where does what. But a really good number that I really like is from the EPA, which stated in 2020 over 4,300 acres at a 50-foot depth avoided being landfill to recycle. That is a huge amount of land, right, that didn't get trash put in it because we recycled. The second thing that I want to put into that portion of what is recyclable is that with the right education and with the right regulations, there really isn't too much from a technical standpoint to discern whether the new construction nor the demolition of stuff is done. So you can argue that, and I'm not sure if the lady's still here from the Construction Association, but new construction guys tend to be different animals in the way that they recycle to the demolition style guys. The demolition style guys are generally very quick, very efficient, and get the stuff taken down very quickly. New construction tends to be, especially on single house building versus, I think the other gentleman that was with the multi-unit living or apartments, is that style of construction is also different. So within the new construction, there is variances in how those loads come. But the great thing about new construction is that for somebody like Matt Smith and for the wood recyclers, obviously it makes it a lot easier to identify, sort, and recycle new materials. That is an absolute fact. If you have drywall that's not painted, if you have wood that's not treated, you can identify those normally in their virgin form a lot easier. And so from that style of it, it does make it easier to identify versus demolition materials. And so, you know, there are advantages to that. However, on the other side of it, you know, demolition contains a lot more metals and a lot more materials that have value that can be withdrawn out of it. You know, people used a lot more copper back in the day when they built 20 years ago versus today. So, you know, there are certain trade-offs between it. But generally, if you ask for me, I do not believe that there is much difference in the recycling of new construction and demolition. I think when I was listening to the conversation before with Bob Lee and the rest of the haulers about identifying, you know, what is picked up, I think it's so wide of a subject matter, it's difficult to break it down into which is the better. But depending with the construction industry and the association with the concrete industry, and as well as with the asphalt industry and some of these other associations, you could start off with a stage thing of starting off with either demolition or with new materials and seeing and making, basically starting off as that as a starting point. That would be something that, you know, I would definitely do. I think also, going back to my very first opening point, identifying the stakeholders and identifying what the market possibly could be is also, before regulation, a very important facet of it. Because then we can take the retract data and see how much of the material we can actually get rid of, and maybe just put the regulations on new construction or on demolition. So again, just a thought. I have no personal opinion to that at the moment. So
Dave, if you can throw out one material, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good. As in what? Throw out for money, or throw out for the good of the environment, or throw out because I hate it?
Throw out because it doesn't have a home, it doesn't have any value, and it's difficult to get to.
Drywall. I think that Matt would probably speak to this, and I think that anybody that's in it, that there is no education, no facility, and no home for drywall because of the issues that drywall cause. So, and I think that if you wanted to focus on a problem area, that's probably, if we got into a conversation about it, still to this day, one of my hardest problems to solve without spending millions of dollars, because the return on investment is a long, long time. So,
okay, due to time, I kind of want to jump forward a little bit, and I'm not real sure which question would be better. what should Louisville do to position itself to divert more construction and demolition materials if such a C&D processing facility is not currently feasible? What roadmap would you take to be able to divert more material if this isn't a viable option?
So I'm going to put somebody's name, and I know that this will probably get objected to, but the only person, in my opinion, after living and believing myself to be a true Louisvillian in 19 years, that's done anything in the recycle sector that's been like, blows me away, has been Scott Smith. What Scott did for Cemex in pushing and solving the tire problem, in my opinion, was an act of God and a miracle. So I believe that Scott Smith is one of the few people locally that understands this marketplace. I would bring Scott in for some conversations. That's the first thing that I would do. The second thing that I would recommend to you guys is this. You put it really well, Pete, in the way that you did it, is the roadmap. I believe that you should take, at this stage, a period of time that the board deems, and I think that you should put together a list of the stakeholders and a list of recyclers, and I think you should look at some places like Austin. Now, Austin came up in 2016 with us. It came up in 2018 with us. They introduced in 2019 their ordinance, and I was in Austin during COVID and was absolutely blown away with the amount of actual C&D diversion that they do. I think that they've done a really good job in introducing regulations to make that happen. I think that the city needs to lead the use of materials. Adam, I don't know whether you can attest to this, but I think that the city itself, as well as maybe Louisville Water, maybe U of L, I'm sorry because I'm getting old, but I believe that U of L and all of these stakeholders were in a group at some stage for the recycling side of life. Would be
Partnership for a Green City.
correct to bring all of those guys back in, because I think that, you know, identifying parks and recs, and this is just the way my mind, the forestry part of the county as well as the state, as well as the road builders, public works, as well as a lot of people use materials. I know that Louisville Water uses a lot of recycled materials. To the best of my belief, and Adam, tell me if I'm lying, 95% of that bids that the RFPs come out do not put in the use of recycled materials because they're not spec'd. So when I talk about stakeholders in a first period, I think that architects, engineers, processors, stakeholders, these people should be brought in to discuss concrete and do concrete. And that be a material that you work on, because that to me seems simple, right? And then after concrete, you knock out the second one, because I think everybody has got some economic or personal or ecological or environmental issue with every one of the materials. I think if in the 15 years that I've known you, Pete, you know, we haven't knocked many out, right? And so it would be good just to start with one and work through that, make that a learning curve, and then try and replicate that in a second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So, you know, if you ask me for a roadmap, I would bring Scott Smith in as a consultant. I would get stakeholders and, more importantly, data, which is true in what the city is using, right? And then I would work together to come up with a solution for concrete. And after concrete, asphalt. After asphalt, shingles, and so on and so forth. But that's just the way I would do it.
So in essence, what you're looking for is to have demand drive recovery. If people spec it, and you know, concrete can be rock if you process it right, and if it's put into the specs for building roads, building culverts, and things, then there'll be a little bit more demand for that material.
Absolutely.
And we would start to drive it from the end user standpoint.
Correct. And I think that you educate the end user that you don't need to go to Lowe's and buy you know, I'll give you a great one. It's a friend of mine, he's up in Kokomo, big recycler in that area of Indiana. He was right next to a toilet manufacturer's, and he ended up taking all of their porcelain toilets that failed production, threw them into a trommel screen, took the sharp edges off of it, and sold it as landscaping material called glitter rock, and has made many millions of dollars doing that. And there's never been a person that landscapes that doesn't say that material is a great material. You know, if they all knew it was made out of old toilets, it might not be as cool as glitter rock, but glitter rock was great, you know. So I think that innovation can come from the industry. And I do think that once you get to the more mundane materials that are harder to recycle, I think that, you know, we can knock the big ones out. And I think as well, even the education, which is important, right, is that if people understand, hey, if you throw this wood away here and you give them this can be recycled into a great mulch that will be going into your schools where your child goes to school with, right? You know, I know that a lot of mulch came back up out of Katrina that had lots of maggots and lots of different insects and all this stuff in it. There was no control on that. So I think you can educate people to use materials that are being recovered locally and really promote that, you know. And so, you know, I'm sorry, Adam, to pick on concrete, but I mean, concrete's a pretty easy one. But I also feel on the concrete side of it, if I was absolutely honest to the committee, I think there's a lot more that could be done to make concrete recycling a lot more effective and a lot better if there was regulations on how people collected and dumped their concrete. I mean, Adam, would you like to speak to how many percentage of tons you have to throw away because it's contaminated with clay or other aggregates or not clean? I mean, there's a lot of this, what I call overburden material that gets thrown away because it can't be recycled because it wasn't collected correctly.
Yeah, very true.
You know, and we're talking not 1,000 tons here, we're talking tens of thousands a year. So I mean, that would be my recommendation, Pete, would be to look at possibly a consultant, whether that be Scott Smith or not. I like Scott because he actually did bring all of the parties together and get a solution for tires. He's also very well respected at the state. I think bringing in the county level an educator that can go out to these different associations and go out and hear what the problems are. I know if I was in the construction industry, because I'm on that side of life as well, is that, you know, a lot of these construction guys are so busy that they don't have time to sort their materials. So should they be penalized? Well, you know, that's a conversation. Is it really penalizing by reusing those materials? But, you know, you only talk about recycling at the moment. Something else that you guys should look at is salvage as well. There's very little opportunity given for people to salvage in the county as well. So, you know, there are different innovative ways out there. And I was just looking at Austin. So Austin now has 23 regulated construction materials that have to go to pre-described recycling facilities. That's a big step. I think that's an important step. I don't think that the solutions that I'm bringing to you take away from the landfills or from the haulers. I don't think that these materials that are coming in, you know, will affect ultimately the haulers, because I think that they're busy in their own spheres, you know, obviously dealing with their materials. So, you know, I think it's a good balance. I think we can up the rate of recycling without affecting too many of the actual people. So
are there any questions from anybody on the committee?
So I guess just to recap with Mr. Wicking, rather than have a broad-based construction, demolition, recycling category, you would break that down into certain components and build a roadmap based on the component, and knowing that we have an outlet for that material when the recycling work is completed, correct?
yes, I mean, if you wanted to take three, for example, drywall, woods, and concrete, I think you have a good basis of companies within the tribe or within Kentuckiana that would be able to advise and, more importantly, process those materials. I think when I talk about recycling, the difficulties, you know, is like carpet recycling. A good example is the convention center, I think, disposes of many tens of thousands of tons of carpets from the conventions each year. That's disposed of into the landfills, and those carpets are used once or twice. If the convention center could be persuaded to use a recyclable style carpet that could then go to a recycler afterwards and be rejuvenated or reused, I think that's a great thing. You know, so I think you can tackle 2 or 3 products. I just don't think you should tackle all 25. And I think there's too many special interest groups that would get scared by trying to get regulations for everything across the board. I do not believe that this is a one-shoe-fits-all scenario.
Any other questions from any of the committee members?
I'll just add, I've only run one convention that was based in the convention center that Dave's referencing. I forget what it's called now, but then the carpet was all made of recycled HDPE. So it would say to me that it's probably pretty recyclable again if somebody put a little bit of pressure on them. Might be an easy, quick win.
And there is a carpet recycler in town, if anybody didn't know that. I didn't know that until just recently.
Yeah. A lot of us recyclers hide away. So, yeah.
Well, I think we've come up with a couple components of this category. But then there's another question I have, and hopefully we still have, let me see, Ms. Barber on here from the construction industry. Do you have any input with regard to, you know, the construction process and the amount of space required to do source separation?
So I actually have a lot to process here as I've just heard Mr. Wicking's comments. You know, one thing I would say about new construction right now is because of the cost of materials and everything is so expensive, and I have to get these numbers, granted I don't have this data, it would seem to me there's probably not that much on site to actually recycle when it comes to new construction. I know that demo is going to be different, and it's going to depend on the type of building you're demoing, whether you're doing something old historic downtown or something that was built in the 80s. So obviously there's a lot there to be discussed. I would also ask, I mean, you know, this is our first bit of engagement on this conversation. While it may not have much of an impact on the haulers, I think if I'm repeating what you said, Mr. Wicking, I'm sure it's going to have quite a bit of an impact on the construction industry itself. You know, if you're talking about space on a job site, I was on a job site this morning and, you know, we have a dumpster. Obviously, we're required to have a dumpster, so we have that there. But, you know, there's not going to be a whole lot of space, in my opinion, for separation on site. And then I'd be curious, too, about the cost. And, you know, I'm concerned when I hear the word penalty. Like, for example, if one sub does something wrong and the developer doesn't know it or the builder doesn't know it, is there going to be a penalty on this person? Again, there's a lot to unpack here. I think this is a much bigger conversation that I would like to dig into further before you make a step of you've got to recycle all the wood and you've got to recycle all the concrete and figure out what to do with the asphalt.
So, if you don't mind me responding to that, Bruce or Pete, Jiva, absolutely. I mean, I think one thing that I've learned with Louisville is that nothing happens overnight. Secondly, that your points are valid. Every one of the points that you just brought up there is absolutely valid. There is also, in recycling, compromises. I had the same issue with the shingles when we started off the shingles, that nobody would ever want to do this. There's no reason. It's just a penalty. It's just going to cost us time and space. You know, with the conversations, we ended up with GFE, Certainty, and all of the rest of these people starting their own, as manufacturers of the products, starting their own product recycling systems that were put out there. Another thing that was seen is that the construction companies that embraced recycling shingles used it to their sales advantage and got better prices and more profit because they were telling the customers that they were recycling. And I know within my own sphere of people that live close to me in my own home area, I know in my own sphere of business that there are many people in the county that are willing to pay a premium for products that are recycled and are following a green method. It's an absolute truth, you know. So I think, yes, it's a massive conversation. I do believe that there are some roadblocks to be accomplished with it, but I could also tell you today that we had 123 dumpsters come through my gates today, and of those 123 dumpsters, over 40 of them were from new construction sites. So there is a lot of material that is coming from those new construction sites that could have been recovered if there was a material recovery facility. So, you know, I agree with you that there's not a lot of time to recycle or sort on site. I do not think that dumpsters are very good for helping to sort nor to do it. But I do think that there are customers as well as contractors that are interested in recycling.
I absolutely don't doubt that there are customers and contractors who are interested in it. I just want to make sure that we don't make a full market change based on the wants or the marketing ability of some of those contractors or customers when they do recycle.
Because I absolutely
again,
agree.
Cost is
agree with you.
always an issue in construction. I mean, I think you all are aware that, you know, we are dealing with some housing challenges, and by that I mean we don't have enough houses right now on the market. I don't think the first thing we want to do is make it more expensive or more difficult to build more of those houses.
Somebody needs to point out, though, and I recognize that the construction industry is a fairly short horizon kind of an industry, but once we lose this landfill, the cost of building a house and putting stuff in a landfill is only going to go up significantly. And I think the industry does have a vested interest in finding a way to extend the life of that landfill.
Well, and that's why we're here tonight. So I would say, you know, I know apparently you all have been, and I don't mean that to sound flippant, but, you know, this conversation I think started in 2019, maybe earlier. And here tonight to talk about solutions that work for both the industry and meet the needs of the community.
Well, I think, Gina, to be fair to the chairman, to the board, the people who have asked me to speak, you know, they've asked what we think is important. And I think before we have these conversations of it's impossible for my industry to do that, you know, innovation comes through conversation, innovation comes through changes. And I think Sarah Lynn had a fair point is, you know, shingle recycling didn't exist in America 15 years ago. And hundreds upon hundreds of thousands, millions and millions of tons of shingles are now being reused in roads, right? Because people did make a change. And so I think what Pete has suggested is bringing you as a stakeholder in, construction companies that are on site building every day in, bringing in the recycling things and having a conversation about it. You know, I don't think that we're talking about imposing penalties or fees on it, but let's have the conversation and let's see what is possible before we put a hard no on something. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, guys.
I think going into this in the spirit of cooperation with a shared goal that we all have something to gain from it, ultimately in the long term, is a good way to go about it. And I am happy, Juva, that you guys are here. And just to know that there hasn't been a decision by anyone to move forward with anything at this point. And we are finally getting to the point where we can start having true discussions about this. And you are at the forefront of this discussion. And we know that it wouldn't move forward without you guys. So welcome and thank you, Dave, for being here to talk to us from that side and Druva from your side.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you all again for having me tonight.
Bruce, I think the other subcommittee.
I'm sorry,
has-
I'm sorry, I was muted. What, Pete?
Okay, go ahead.
I did want to thank them for their participation. And as we move forward, we may need to boil this down to more specific rather than looking at it as general overview topic and, focus on some of the things that Mr. Wicking identified. I think we've got a robust wood recycling opportunity within our community. I think we have obviously Adam with his company with concrete, but it's not our intention to try to make our construction partners their challenge more difficult in building homes and housing our community members. So it's got to be something that works for all the parties. With that said, does any other committee member have any comments? I know we're running over tonight and I apologize for that. So if I may, can we move on to the ICI self-hauler subcommittee report? Mr. Zernick, are you?
Yeah, I'm on. But since we're over, I'll keep it very brief. I appreciate all the discussion we've had so far. We had a very productive 1 hour or so meeting right before this meeting. And we went over the letter to stakeholders that the staff had presented for us from what we requested at the last meeting, made a few small changes, and that's going to go out to the potential stakeholders. And what we did, they also then they just now sent a letter to us that we're going to review what the other cities have done, like Austin and Chicago and Orlando and all that, and see if we have come up personally with any pros and cons, as individuals that we sort of we'll look at as some individual people. So I want to keep it real brief because of the time. So any questions on anything, or anybody want to add anything that was on the meeting?
Yeah, Greg, if I could, I would just want to make sure that people understand what the self-haul is, at least from the perspective of what we're trying to accomplish.
That's a good point.
That is, there's two recommendations as related to self-haul. And self-haul is defined as primarily residential materials delivered directly to a disposal facility by the original generator in a car, van, or small truck. So we're talking about a very narrow group of people. And we're also talking about a very narrow group of facilities, disposal facilities, which I believe that there are 4 in Jefferson County. It's probably one of the smaller groups that we have out there. But the idea after looking at the study was that of all the different waste streams out there and the percent of recovery, this one was the lowest percentage. Only 7% of self-haul waste is actually recovered. And there was a big portion of it that could be recovered. And the idea is that at disposal facilities that you allow or have a space for those self-haulers to separate their materials. So now we're not talking about a separation facility that does it. We're talking about the customer. It's a small group to be able to go and separate their materials, not for free, but at a cost that's less than disposal. And if you do that, you can get some pretty good diversion. But it is a complicated issue. And just like C&D material, there has to be a lot of discussion. And we have to look at it with stakeholders, and we have to make sure that we understand it, and that before we decide to move forward on anything, that we engage our stakeholders.
Well put, thank you.
Is there anything you want to go over, Greg?
No, I think that's well said, and that's all I have. If there's any questions, I'll entertain them.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the staff report. Or Karen, can you give us a quick overview of the enforcement updates or the education updates?
Well, we did want to introduce Whitney Hickman as our new solid waste enforcement supervisor. She's very new and still learning everything. I don't know, Pete, do you want to say anything else about Whitney?
Whitney is the new Rob Lush. Everybody knew Rob, but Whitney is the new Rob, and she is definitely getting her feet wet, and she's at the forefront of a lot of changes over the next several years, particularly when it comes to illegal dumping and cleanliness. A really big push on that. So I don't know if Whitney wants to say anything, but Whitney has a strength in performance measurement, and I think that when you start to look at data, Whitney is going to help us in that regard. She's going to learn the enforcement side of things, but she has a strong background in data and being able to visualize and analyze that data. So we welcome her. That's something that we really need.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Hi.
Glad to be in the group.
We all welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney. And also, I'm just going to give a very brief education update. For one, I've been highly distracted today, and I apologize. We had a press release go out today. So I actually did 2 interviews during this meeting. You had no idea. Thankfully, they were on Zoom, which makes news interviews super easy. But so the carts are coming, basically. Every other week recycling will begin July 12th. That's what you're going to read. The other thing is we do have a pop-up drop-off event, which of course, is a big thing we've been providing. Started last year toward the end of the year, but this year, March to November, every month, we're doing an event around the county, and that is thanks to the district waste district board. And so this one's going to be at the Eastern High School parking lot. And of course, details are on our website, but louisvilleky.gov/pop-ups. And I think that's basically it. We've just been a little swamped, so I apologize for being so distracted today. And thank you, Pete, for helping me out.
No problem. I would only add one thing to our enforcement side of things. A little bit of warning to those illegal dumpers out there. We have just got our full allotment of surveillance cameras, and we've gotten our equipment to install them. So we are in the process of putting those out there, and it's already paying off, and should hopefully start to see more impounds on the news. And we hope that everybody shares the fact that we impound people, and even that they can report it through our louisvilleky.gov illegal dumping. They can upload their own videos or photos, be anonymous, and we can enforce based upon those videos. So it is a community issue. It's illegal dumping, whether they're dumping it on the ground or they're dumping it in your dumpster. Because if they dump it in your dumpster, you don't have room in your dumpster for your waste. So just keep that out there and be watching for it. And hopefully we're going to get some good publicity with these impounds coming up.
Right on.
Any questions from any committee members for Karen or Pete? Or
Actually, I got and I talked to too many people in a given week, so I can't tell you where it came from, but I had somebody tell me that she thought that her recycling and yard waste, one or the other, was getting commingled with trash still, and she thought that was really wrong. And I said that there was a temporary COVID exemption, but that I didn't know if that was still going on. Can anybody address that in hopes that I remember who it was that asked me so I can tell her?
I can address that. Yes, there was a waiver on that, as long as that waste hauler made notification to the Waste District Board that they were going to deviate from standard and required services under the ordinance. And that occurred for a while. A lot of people don't realize that all of that material that was at businesses, restaurants, came home to the curb. And there was massive amounts of trash, and it was very difficult to handle all of it from your curbside collection services. So all of that has passed. Most of the collection streams have receded back to close to their normal level. I'm happy to say that recycling has stayed above normal, but right now there shouldn't be any commingling of waste going on in Jefferson County.
What about Southern Indiana?
Can't answer that.
Okay. Thank you.
any comment from any of the, I guess, attendees from the public? Hearing none, on to the next item on the agenda, and we're into the announcements. The next 109 board meeting will be Wednesday, May 26th, 5:30 to 7. And the subcommittee meetings will be residential C&D Tuesday, June 8th from 2 to 3. And ISL Hall Wednesday, June 16th from 3:15 to 4:15, with our next advisory committee meeting on the 16th, 4:30 to 6 p.m. I guess the committee, I'll speak on behalf of the committee. We want to thank everyone's involvement tonight. I think it's been very informative, and it's given us a bit of a benchmark to shoot for with regard to identifying individual, items and goals. We want to build something that is sustainable, that really is, as I said previously, a collaborative effort to improve our community. So thank you all for that. Any other comments from any of the committee members? Hearing none, any other comments from the public at large? Well, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. If there's no comments, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion by whom?
Motion was by Adam. I don't know who the second was.
I think it was Karen.
Donna.
Okay.
Julie Donna.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much. We certainly appreciate everyone's input.
Thank you,
And have a very
Bruce.
safe
Thanks.
evening.
Thanks,
Pete,
everybody.
Pete, are you
Thank you,
still
guys.
on?
Pete? Yeah, Pete's still
Yeah,
here.
Can you stay here just a second? You got a minute?